Hey, good morning out there, YouTubers. McGerkFish65 Outdoors. Professor Fish here. But today I'm going to be Professor Hunter. Fishing's been real slow in Florida lately. We've tried to shoot a bunch of shows. We've even gone to saltwater and Crystal River and Mosquito Lagoon and Indian River last weekend and still didn't hit any fish. It's just hot, muggy down here. Heat index yesterday was 104. It was 110 last week, heat index. So it's been uncomfortable to go out and fish. And the fish are not reactive this time of year. We gotta wait for the first cold front of the fall to hit to really get things going. So instead of trying to film shows over and over again every week, they're not showing any fish and I'm just doing instruction. I thought we'd shift gears a little bit and try to show you a little bit about archery and bow hunting. That's another hobby I have. I'm an outdoorsman. I do anything that's outdoors pretty much. I mean, talking about sailing, swimming, boating, hiking, camping, archery, guns, fishing, any of that stuff I love. Basically anything you buy at Bass Pro Shops, I like to do. Even outdoor barbecuing and cooking. So what we're going to do on this segment, I've divided the show out now as if it were a college course. This is module number 1, was bass fishing and casting fundamentals and that sort of thing, which was some piecemeal stuff and just got the show started. Module number 2 now is going to be related to bow hunting and archery. I'm going to do several segments and posts on YouTube that are related to archery, bow hunting, archery fundamentals, and that sort of thing. Now, I'm not a professional archer by any means. I'm not even a professional bow hunter. I have killed squirrels, 1 deer, and raccoons with a bow, but I never extensively bow hunted like some of these guys do. They go out and kill moose and bear and even African big game I've seen on some sportsman's channel and outdoor channels with a bow. I saw Jim Shockey one day take a moose with a bow. I mean, it's insane. But he's a professional hunter and guide. He's good at that. But what we're going to do is just show you some small things about archery and bow hunting. Tips I've picked up. I've been shooting seriously archery since about 12. I'm at mid-50s now, so it's been about 40 years experience on this. I lived in Los Angeles for a couple of years and was able to go to a practice range that was an Olympic practice facility that Easton sponsored. It was free, and I joined an archery club there called Woodley Park Archers, and we had an enclosed shooting range, and there was an open field, so you could shoot anywhere from 17 meters or 20 yards all the way out to 70 meters. And what was cool about it is some of the guys that shot there also were Vegas shooters. So I got to shoot a $1,500 OK archery bow one day. It was really neat because it was much more accurate than my bow, much less feedback, much less recoil on it. Really neat thing to do. It was kind of like driving a Ferrari versus driving a Volkswagen. So those guys gave me some archery tips for shooting that I'm going to give to you and see if I can help you in archery, try to become more accurate and enjoy the sport a little more. It's a great sport. I use it for physical exercise. I'm diabetic and have a heart condition. I don't like to lift weights too much. It's kind of boring to me and going to a gym. I'm an outdoorsman. If I'm going to do some kind of physical activity, it's going to be outdoors. So shooting a bow is the same as lifting weights. It's required to pull back the weight of the bow and causes you to have physical exertion and build your physique. Okay? Now it's morning here, so I'm drinking coffee. I got my sponsor's cup out here. This is Razorfin Fishing, sponsors the channel now. They provide me with hats, shirts, apparel, and these buffs that I wear. And Razorfin buffs are really cool. I saw these the first time a couple years ago. I was watching, I think, Sportsman's channel, and these guys were fishing. I was like, what the heck is that thing on their neck? And it's a buff. And they're wearing it up on their face like this going down the lake. So I'm like, what in the world? So are they trying to hold up a bank, or was I seeing the future of coronavirus? No, what the things do is they can protect your neck from harmful UV rays. Wearing sunscreen is kind of a pain. I mean, I wear it too, always. But what sunscreen does is it gets oily and nasty. You actually sweat in your eyes, and your eyes burn from sunscreen. You get it all over your clothes and whatever. So instead of putting sunscreen on your neck, you wear a buff. Okay, they wear these on that show Survivor. They always had the buff, and the tribes were separated by buffs. So these have made an appearance in fishing and hunting now. The ones that Razorfin has are really cool. If you look at this one, it's digital camo. I have 2 digital camo ones, some nice patterned ones with the company logo, and some with fish on them. The company is really cool. I'll put a post or a link to their website on this post so you can take a look at their merchandise. It's a great company. They sponsor me. They send me apparel. This hat is also Razorfin, and their hats have this wooden plaque with their company's logo on it. You can see it right there. It's Razorfin, and it's riveted onto the hat. The hats are really tough. They're good. You wear this and this, you're protected from the sun a great deal. And down in Florida, sun is a serious problem when you're an outdoorsman. Potential for skin cancer is very high. And I've seen guys like Bill Dance, he showed on his show one time where he's had skin cancers cut off of his hands over time from spending so much time out in the sun. Bill's a professional fisherman, probably spends at least 150 days a year on the water. I've been a professional guide before and have gotten fried in the sun and used to carry a tan that made me look like a Nubian prince. I'm very dark all the time from being in the sun. But I also know that you can get melanomas that can go to metastasis cancer, because I used to work in radiology, and skin cancer turns into basically lung cancer, liver cancer, and brain cancer unchecked. If you have suspicious lesions on your body or an area that looks like a mole and it changes shape or bleeds or whatever, I'm not a medical professional, but I would say consult your physician and check it out. They can biopsy it very simple and save you a skin cancer problem down the road. And you'll notice most modern anglers are now wearing long sleeve shirts, wide brimmed hats, and these buffs to protect them from the sun, because it is very harsh. Okay? Alright, so let's get to the archery thing now. What we're going to do this morning is teach you guys fundamentals of archery. I've got an arrow pointer here that I'm going to use as my pointing tool in class. Let's get to it and I'll teach you what I know. Okay guys, now I kind of got over here out of the sun a little bit. I'm trying not to shoot the camera into the sun so that your view is not obstructed. So we're going to be behind a tree. And that looks kind of cool because you got the bows against the tree. We look woodsy like we're in Bass Pro Shops or something like that. So just hang tight here for a second. What I'm going to do is show you the kind of equipment that I use when I do archery. So what we have here are two different bows. They're both compound bows, and that's what I've shot since the 1980s. In the early 80s, my brother bought a Bear Polar LTD bow, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. This thing shot much faster than a recurve or a compound, had sights on it, had an adjustable rest, and was easy to shoot because you could draw back the bow. And it was in peak point like to here as you pulled the string. Once you got back here, it suddenly got easy to hold. So I was a little wimpy kid back then. I couldn't hold a bow very well, like a big recurve that you would hunt with, like let's say 40 pounds or 50 pounds, like a Bear Kodiak. But this thing, the Bear Polar LTD, had eccentrics and cables on it, like this bow, but even more complex design then. And what it allowed you to do was to pull the arrow back. And if you got past what's called breakaway point, it got easy to hold back here. So you can sit there and hold it all day and shoot. Now, I wasn't very strong at first, and that birthday year, I asked my parents for a Bear Whitetail Hunter, which is the same design bow with fiberglass limbs up here instead of wooden limbs and laminates like the Bear Polar LTD had. That bow came in 50 to 60 pounds, so I lifted weights from, let's say, May to October so that I could shoot that bow in order to do it. And I was able to, so I worked up from 45 pounds on the Polar LTD to 50 pounds on that. Eventually in archery, I got to shoot 70 pounds of pressure on the bow. 70-pound bow shoots about with the force of a rifle when it hits. Well, it's not exactly the same, because force is mass times acceleration. But these things will go all the way through a deer when you shoot them with a broadhead. They're extremely powerful. They are deadly weapons. You have to be careful when you shoot them that you're in a safe area with a backstop, not with people in your line of sight, because these things can be lethal, handled improperly. Okay, so as far as design, the one on here on the left is a Jennings Titan. You can actually see on the limbs, they always put the name of the bow on there pretty much. Like on this one over here, it's a Redhead Chronic XT, you'll see that. So they've got this emblazoned on the front, so they basically advertise for their company. So the difference between these two bows, take a look. This is a 1980s to 90s design. This is a modern 21st century 2000. I bought this bow in 2016. So look at how technology has evolved for a device that does the same thing. The older Jennings, and Jennings is not even in business anymore, which is unfortunate. As far as I know, they're not. Jennings was an excellent company. They made some of the best bows in its day. Now, it'd probably be considered Matthews is very similar to them, or Elite. Very high-end company. Jennings bows were not cheap. They were sort of Cadillac-ish. They were acquired by Bear Archery, I believe in the early 1980s. Tom Jennings sold out Jennings to Bear, and their quality seemed to go downhill a little bit. They went from more of a custom design to more of a mass-produced design, which is what Bear Archery does. So it kind of went the wayside. Bear also acquired a bunch of other companies like Golden Eagle Archery and that sort of thing. They're all out of business now. Bear Archery still makes excellent bows. They are up here in Gainesville, Florida, not far from me, so it's one of the best bow companies you can get their equipment from. I'm not sponsored by a bow company, so I'm not endorsing any particular equipment in any of these videos. What I'm showing you is what I bought and what I use. Okay. Now, with the Jennings over here, Again, long limb design. Much longer. I think the distance between here and here is 38 to 40 inches on here. I haven't measured it out. Notice the more compact design of this Redhead Chronic XT. This thing is tiny. Okay, you pick it up. I can pick it up with a couple of fingers. Even with heavy stabilizers on it to hold it, it doesn't weigh anything. So you go hunting with this thing up in the mountains. You can carry this on your back or in your hands and not get worn out. It is lightweight equipment, but it's very powerful. It's just as powerful as the bigger bow over here. If I can get this thing to stand back up, that'd be a miracle. Yeah, there we go. Alright, so some things about fundamental bow design. In a compound bow, the limbs only do part of the work. In a recurve or longbow, the limbs do all of the work. They compress, the string goes back, and you've got a vector that forms as this limb pulls, and that limb pulls to get back to this arch shape. It causes the string to go forward and your arrow flies. That's how a bow works physically. What they decided back in, I believe, the 1960s, I could be wrong about that, I looked it up once. There was a guy that worked for a company, and he was a machinist, and what he did is he took the regular bow and he put eccentric wheels and cables on the end of the bow. Now what these are, an eccentric is a wheel with an offset mount. Notice this is a round wheel, but right here is where the mounting point is. So this wheel rolls over as you pull the bow back and comes into a power stage because of that. You have a peak that develops as the wheel gets to the top of the rollover, and then as it comes back it actually lets off. So when this bow is fired, what happens is this wheel is pulled up by the limbs just like a regular bow, but this wheel accelerates around, and when it hits that load point you get to the full power of the bow within a very, very short distance. So you can pull this thing back, way back here, and let's say you're holding 50 pounds of weight as you draw it. If you have a 10% let off, you're holding 5 pounds of weight back here, which is nothing. As soon as you let go of that thing, this goes from 5 pounds to immediately to 50, and there's this huge acceleration from here all the way to the stopping point of the string, which is the draw length. That's determined down here by what's called brace height, which is the distance between the string itself and the top of the bow handle. The shorter the brace height, the easier the bow is to handle as a rule. I'm not positive about that, but I think I read that. So, in design, this bow shoots faster than a recurve bow because of that. It's also easier to handle because it has a let-off point and you hold back here under almost no pressure. So if you're not particularly strong, you hit the peak point and it goes back here and holds easy. When it holds easy, you can line up on the target and shoot better. These things are as accurate as a gun at close range. All right. Now over here, Redhead Chronic XT deserves a special look because that's the one we're going to be shooting today. That Jennings has a part that came off of it that I ordered that's coming in on eBay today that I've got to fix, that pulls the cables out. I didn't notice that the other day, and this actually, you'll notice, started digging into here to the steel. That's how much pressure these cables are under that build the bow's power. Over here in more modern design, there's not cabling. What they've done is replace this basically with Kevlar fiber. That's what the strings are made out of. So as you take a look close, this string has a number of strands that are wrapped, and it is a continuous string. It goes down here, around the cam, it goes up into the bow frame and around, so the thing's immensely long. This has separate strings and cables, the older design. This is actually a steel cable that's plastic coated, and then the bowstring was Dacron, now they're Kevlar fiber, okay? Or almost like a spider wire or Spectra fiber, like you use in braided fishing line. So the bow design itself, this is a Redhead Chronic XT. That's a Bass Pro Shops bow. It's an entry-level hunting bow. They don't sell this particular model anymore that I know about. It was replaced, I believe, by Blackout Archery, and then they kind of went back and forth on design for a few years. But an entry-level bow at Bass Pro cost me about $300 at a Bass Pro out in California 4 or 5 years ago. So you take a look at this thing, Redhead Chronic XT. It's also made by Diamond Archery, which is owned by Bowtech. So it's a Redhead Chronic XT Diamond Bowtech. It's got the world's longest bow name. I'm trying to figure out what it is. Now, Bowtech is a very high-end archery company. They're like Matthews, they're like Elite, that sort of thing. They make very nice equipment. PSE is like that too. Some of their bows can go up to $1,000 or more and are precision made. Now, the thing about Diamond is they do the single pulley and cam design. You'll see the cam down here under that poof ball that I put on. The cam is where this bow actually builds its power from. So in a cam and pulley design, you have a pulley that compresses and pulls this limb down. The cam is where the bow's power comes from. They don't need these limbs, because of the cam, to be as straight as these are to build an arc for power. These have to bend a great deal of distance in order to build the power to shoot the arrow. On this bow, the limbs are what are called parallel limbs. Take a look. This limb also almost comes to a parallel to the ground design. It's up here at an angle, but it's much less steep than the Jennings over here. So some of the new bows I've seen, this actually goes and curves downward to an almost anti-parallel design. They still get power because it's the cam doing most of the work. Now the way that cam works is that in physics, it's a rotational mechanical advantage device. They're using car engines to build power. What a cam does in a car engine is it lifts the valves and causes air intake and fuel intake into the engine. The bigger the cam, the bigger the air intake and fuel intake, basically the bigger the engine's horsepower. So you'll see like a Corvette engine might have a huge cam, where, like I said, a Honda Civic will have smaller cam in the engine. And when the cam lopes or turns out, this is not a round wheel. This is a wheel that's tear-shaped. So it builds power, and then comes to a huge peak, and then comes off. So as it's lifting the valves in the engine, the bigger, the more radical this design, the bigger the valve jump, and the bigger the acceleration. That's why a Corvette can go from 0 to 60 and whatever, versus on the Civic. Somebody figured out, I do not know who, in the 1980s, cam bows came out. I think in '83 was the first time I saw one. I saw PSE Nova. That's a great bow. I've owned 5 of them. I had one back in 1983, I think I bought one. It had graphite limbs here, and it had 2 fiberglass cams. So it had basically this design in a cam shape. Let me tell you something, that bow was lightning fast compared to the bare whitetail hunter I had. Whitetail hunter would maybe do 150 feet per second. This thing was 207 on a chronograph. It was much flatter shooting, much quicker, much quieter. It was a real hunting weapon. So once they put cams in archery, they changed the sport totally. Now initially there were 2 cams in bows. You had one at the top and one at the bottom. The bows are still designed like that today that are made by Bowtech, for example. I've noticed they do the 2 cam design. Their more discount line, which is Diamond Archery, same company, different name. It's kind of like, you know, Ford and Lincoln Mercury or GMC and Chevy. The Diamonds have cam and pulley design, or single cam, or what Matthews calls solo cam. So you got 1 cam and a pulley. The way they're getting mechanical advantage in this is doing all the load. This is just riding around. They both pull the limbs together like drawing back a conventional bow. But because this cam's design is so radical and so big, let me take a look at this tiny bow. And I think it's 30 inches from here to here. This cam is huge. This diameter on this thing is almost 6 inches. So what it does is this is what builds the power. And you take a look at the thing, it's got quite a radical design. It's machined aluminum. There are cutouts here to make it lighter. And there are even a module on here on the other side of the bow. If you take a look, what it does is it allows you to change and customize draw length on this bow for individual shooter. But you can do it without putting it in a bow press and taking tension off the cable. It's really cool the way they're designed now. So I bought this at Bass Pro initially. I had them set it for 29 inches, which I thought was my draw length. I originally thought it was 30, but I think my arms have gotten shorter or something over time because the 30 is now too long for me. So what I ended up doing is going back to Bass Pro and having them adjust this module on here, and they changed the screw setting, and what it did is it changed the draw length. I went from 29 to I think 28.5. All of a sudden when I pulled the arrow back, it was much more in my draw length and got it customized. So this bow can be customized for draw length. Not so much the Jennings. This thing is a 30-inch draw length, and it's a little long for me, but I just kind of pull it back and push the bow forward as far as I can to shoot it. I love this bow. I got it, like I said, at a yard sale for 10 bucks. It is my bow fishing bow. I have a reel and all that stuff that goes up here. I use that thing for bow fishing carp, gar, and that sort of thing. And also alligator hunting that could be used for. I want to try that with it. But this is an old clunk. But it shoots just as good, almost, as the Redhead. 10 bucks, 300 bucks. The accuracy in a bow is not so much to do with the bow itself as your form and technique. This is the same as I said about fishing reels. $300 reel casts just as well as a $40, $30 reel. It's the guy throwing it or the girl throwing it that makes a difference. That is really true in archery. It's your form that does the deal. Okay. Now, some things about this bow's accessories that I put on here. This bow came with a sight and a peep sight. It had a rubber tube to straighten it out. It had a quiver and no stabilizers or anything like that. No bow sling that I have like here. And actually, if you want to look over here, here's the bow sling that was on this bow originally that I bought for it. And here's the quiver that came with it originally. What I did is when I had this bow, this bow is all recycled stuff I had in a box. Stabilizer, all these parts, and that sort of thing. This one is all customized. What I did is I changed the original sight out for a different one, and then finally came down to this True Glow click adjustable sight. This thing's like a rifle scope. It clicks and adjusts for windage and elevation. So you can get this thing dialed in like a gun. Rear sight, I got rid of that rubber tube design because it has a rubber tube on those peep designs that straighten out the sight and make it straight, but what it does is it slaps and actually damages the cables on these over time. So I took that design off. My buddy and Simon at the archery range said, you need to get rid of that sight. He's a Chinese guy. And he had me put in a peep sight like this one. And all you have to do is when you install it, your rotation of the string has to account for when you pull it straight back, the peep straightens out. I had a bigger aperture on here. This week I just changed to a smaller one and got more precise on my shooting. Okay, so there's a peep sight on the rear. I tied that in myself. I served that just like you put on a fishing rod guide or make a jig. It's the same thing. So if you have that skill of how to tie flies or how to tie jigs, you can use that in archery, because that's what an archery tech does when they're installing all this stuff, is they use those fishing knots. So it's the same sport related. This bow also had kind of like a whisker biscuit rest at first. I don't like those as a rule. They're great for hunting, but in target shooting, the arrows, they damage the fletching. So you don't have arrows for many cycles shooting through, and arrows are very expensive. I mean, I pay cheap ones are $3 a piece. You can go to $4 or $5. You can easily go to $10 a piece, $20 a piece for certain arrows. But what I changed this for was a drop-away limb-driven rest. This is another True Glow product. And what happens when the arrow is shot, you take a look at the rest, okay? It is laying down right now. There's a cord that goes up from the rest to the top limb, and it's attached up here. When this limb compresses, when you shoot, what happens is this rest will pop up and lift up the arrow when you draw back. So the arrow's sitting here, then all of a sudden it goes kind of from here to lift up. So the rest is in perfect firing position coming back, and it's adjustable for that. Then when you fire, the rest drops out of the way, and this arrow goes straight out of here, unimpeded by the rest. So you get more of a true flight, and you have less of a problem with accuracy. So that's really neat about drop-away rests. A lot of times, I had one on here for a long time that was cable-driven. So it was spring-loaded, and what the triggering mechanism was driven by this cable moving over here. When it drew the bow back, the cable itself was where it was tied into. I found limb-driven rests on the internet and read about them. I said, these are even cooler. And what it does is it goes off the limb timing is actually what actuates the rest. So when you do that, the thing of it is that the rest will definitely be clear of the fletching by the time it comes through. When you fire and the fletching is coming through on the arrow, the rest will be out of the way. Where drop-away rests become a problem is when the fletching contacts the rest as it's going through, because of rest timing, where it's tied on the cables, is not clear totally when the fletching comes through. You have to look at this thing in time-lapse or slow motion to see that. But if you compress it slowly and let the draw down, you'll see when the rest drops away. And you'll notice on a limb-driven rest, it's always way clear before the fletching gets in, so there's no interference. I think they're superior for that. But it's a matter of preference. I mean, I'm not telling you the best way to do anything. What I say is like that movie from that lion Shane. He tells a kid how to shoot a gun. The way I'm teaching you is as good a way as any, better than most. So, having a PhD from the School of Hard Knocks, I've learned a lot of stuff the hard way. So back to setup on this bow. So we've got front and rear sights. This sight is actually fiber optic. The colored pins inside here that give you different yardages light up because of fiber optic tubes. There's a light. We can turn this on at night for low light shooting. There's a ring around here that glows in the dark. That's going to be your front sight alignment. There's a ring, as the peep sight is itself. That's your rear sight alignment. And I'll diagram that on Professor's pad here in a minute. I'm actually doing a classroom legal pad out here, and that's going to be like my chalkboard. Other features on this bow, there are silencers that the factory puts on it on the bus cable. This is the main drive cable for the cam. They twang a lot, so they put rubber on there and down here. I added these puff silencers the other day. They're nothing but yarn, and they're tied on with Power Pro fishing line. What they do though is they cut out all string twang. Now there's a thing on down here that's called a string stop, and what it does is it stops the string when it comes forward from vibrating. So when it hits that, it goes twink, and that's it. You hear a thunk when this bow fires. But you put those puff silencers on there, it gets even more quiet. But here's the deal. I'm getting old and I can't see that good anymore. So I got bifocals. When I leave this camo bow in the woods, sometimes I have trouble trying to find it. So I put these purple things on here so I can see it. That's really the reason, but don't tell anybody. Okay. Now, one last feature on here, on a bow, a good thing to have are stabilizers. I started shooting with these when I got that cam bow in the 80s. What a stabilizer does is it causes the bow to balance in your hand. Okay. And you want it balanced in order to make a clear shot, because you look on this sight, they've actually got like a carpenter's level on here that tells you if you're tipped from side to side. Your form in archery is that critical. So you put stabilizers on the bow to balance it out. There's a lot of equipment on this bow. If you take a look over here, there's a quiver that holds your arrows for hunting. These have broadheads inside here. And the quiver throws all the weight of the bow to the right. The sight is also offset to the right. So when you draw this thing back, the bow tends to lean over. If you take a look here, sorry I don't have a cameraman, so I gotta do this with one hand. The bow tends to, when you fire, it tends to lean over when you draw back like that a little bit. What the stabilizer does, you'll notice there's one on the left side here, camo carbon fiber rod one, and one on the center. The center one causes the bow to go down. You'll notice when I let go of this thing wants to go down. Well, when you draw it back, it wants to go up, so that balances it out. The one over here, if you'll notice this bow when it's held, is dead level. I can't even get zoomed in on that level, but it's pretty close to level. Right there is level. There. So that tells you when you're shooting that you're dead square, which you want to be. Now your sight picture depends on looking down here. And what you have are different pins up here for different ranges. So the top one sometimes is like 20, 30, 40, 50. That accounts for the arc of the bow, as you have to raise up because the arrow flies in an arc. The sight picture that you have looking through the rear sight here is a circle. You line that up with this circle up here, then you place the pin on the target. So it's just like a gun sight with a peep sight, which is what this is called. It's an archery peep sight. Okay? So what that does is you look through here, you look through here, you line the pin up, you got a rifle scope, man. It's pretty cool. And then something that came out several years ago, used to pull with your fingers, of course. That doesn't work well with these short axis, short limb bows, because the pinch point here is so radical. You're actually not holding the pin or the string in a acute angle like you need. It's kind of spread out. So finger shooting with a narrow limb bow like this doesn't work well. So you have a thing on here called a D loop that's tied on. It's just Dacron string, and it's tied on to the string itself. And when you use a release aid, which you use, with most bows now, which is basically a trigger mechanism that clamps on here, the release aid clips onto the D loop. The D loop is actually what fires. So you're cutting down friction on there. And you'll take a look at the way I did this myself. This is served in here with a bunch of spider wire fishing line. I coated it with super glue, and the arrow sits down in here. It clips on here every time. So when you do that, when you're going to fire, it's in the same place. I put a couple of knocking points on here that reduces string vibration, excuse me, but it also gives me what's called a kisser button. When this thing is back, this touches the corner of my mouth and gives me another anchor point when I shoot with. So it makes it consistent. In archery, you have to be consistent in order to be accurate. You have to actually have an athletic form in archery. Archery is an Olympic sport. They're not allowed to use compounds in Olympic archery, but they use recurves. You'll notice those guys have perfect athletic form. Brady Ellison's one of the best shooters I ever saw. He holds back a 55-pound bow the whole time without a problem. He's really strong. He's got his biceps built up from weightlifting. He also shoots at 70 meters and hits a bullseye the size of a quarter, and can shoot through a moving CD through the hole. So these guys are really skilled. But the stabilizers on his bow are very long. He's got V-bars on the back, and that's the first place I ever saw those. I was like, I wonder what those all are about. It's to balance the bow out so you can hold steady to get a sight picture. So that's pretty much bow fundamentals. Now let's get to a little shooting. Like a Hellcat.